뭐야, 소독해? 창문 닫아.
나도 봐. 공짜로 집안에 소독도 하고.
So there is one other film that's also won Best Picture in the Palme d'Or.
Which one?
The Lost Weekend by Billy Wilder.
Nice.
That's my last fact.
Something that Parasite just did.
That was the link.
Just
If
just
anyone
won
didn't-
the Palme d'Or.
You can put that in the intro.
And the best. It won Best Picture, right? Not Best Foreign Film.
No, it won Best Picture and Best Foreign Film.
And didn't it win
That's
like
such
best
bullshit.
best
How can you have
director as well? Didn't it win like a bunch of other things? Like best.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it
did,
did,
but
yeah. Basically, just
not that it matters much.
no, it doesn't matter much. But it's obviously the biggest film of 2019.
In terms of award success.
Yes,
Yeah.
critical acclaim, probably commercial success and profit.
Well, like related to its budget.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what did you guys think about it? What did you think about it, Theo?
I'm a big fan of Bong Joon-ho. A massive fan. And what can I say? I enjoyed it. I think it's probably accumulation of what he does or what he has done for most of his career.
Mm-hmm.
And he's perfected it. Because this is, I would say it's really typically in style for him. Like beat changes, genre change, like a mix of horrifying elements and humor. I think he does it quite well.
But do you think like the perfection of it, or perfecting his style, actually makes it like a bit less interesting than some of the more imperfect, like Memories of Murder or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's a bit... I mean, it was so good that I found myself kind of... Like, I enjoyed it and I found myself thinking it was so good, but I perhaps wasn't as invested, maybe, as his other films. Like, I've been telling everyone that I can, The Host is a really good mirror piece for it, because it's also family dynamics, and it's actually really a family drama.
Visually very different though, right?
Visually very different, because that was like a sci-fi with a really shitty monster in it. No offense.
Yeah.
But like...
But it's kind of shot like an action film, basically.
Yes.
It's super bleak
It's a
bypass.
sci-fi,
Yep.
sci-fi action, but it's actually a family drama at the heart of it. And this, I think, is also a family drama.
But I feel like in The Host, maybe I haven't seen it for a while, but the characters feel a bit more real in a way. They're not so kind of prescribed.
I think it helps because that family is a lot more dysfunctional, and that's part of the story, right? Like, they come together because of this event, and I feel like that's a lot more relatable than this. Like, actually, in Parasite, they're like a really good family. They all get on super well. You know, they're all kind to each other. They're all clearly quite
United.
able. Yeah,
it's kind of unrealistic that you'd be living in such close quarters with your parents and
Exactly.
like speaking from experience in your 20s and then still getting on really well.
Yes, exactly.
And like talking to each other at meal times.
Exactly. But I think this film was like, it's in the script as well. Like, it's more of a metaphor. I don't think it's meant to be taken as literally or anything.
But that's my whole issue with the film. Is
Here we
that
go.
I mean, for the record, it's like obviously
not in
there
the
are
Bong hive.
brilliant things about the film, and I think as regards to movies that deserve to be injected into the mainstream, and that it's a good thing that they're in the mainstream. Obviously, it's one of those films, but I think that the film was so obsessed and self-aware, but self-awareness isn't necessarily an issue. Like, the film was so invested in its own structure and its own plotting, and it was so impressed by its own plotting that it forgot actually to make a film about real people. And I think it tried to make a film about real people. You know,
but by
we were
making them
talking the other
poor,
day.
That's what's real about them.
Well, yeah,
They're
like, I think
struggling economically.
It just, like, there are so many great characters that actually I want to see this as a one-off 10-episode TV show.
Which is what is happening.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who's making it?
Americans.
Mark Ruffalo, isn't it? Or something?
I think so. Yeah.
Oh my
yeah,
god!
I think it's
We were
Mark
just
Ruffalo.
talking
Oh yeah,
about
you're
him.
right.
And
Yeah,
Tilda
you're
Swinton,
right.
I think.
Yeah.
Tilda Swinton
read
will
that.
play. Tilda Swinton will play both.
I
I mean, it's a good
all of
idea.
them. But no, he, and I thought like the characters were so interesting, and it could have made such a great. The crux of the climax of the film is the smell, right? This issue with the rich guy, the rich patriarch, literally not liking the smell of the poor patriarch, if you can call him that. And so that's how the film turns in the end. And I think that would have been, if the whole film was about that, it was like the face off of these two men, that I would have been with you. But it wasn't that, and it I just think it would have worked better as a television show.
Yeah. I mean, I think we spoke about this, but I think what I do find interesting about it, and the fact that is that it kind of is like this Bollywood style film that like crosses genres, and you don't completely get invested with the character. And I just feel like it's like people are sort of consuming film in very different ways. We don't need them to be boxed in one genre. It's like Bollywood films are like a romance and then thriller and then action, and we kind of laugh at that. Like, we don't take that seriously, but he kind of did that, and I feel like, I don't know.
But he didn't do it very... I mean, the combination of genres isn't an issue for me. The split with, like, the horror element in the middle, I kind of rubbed my hands together and I was like, okay, here we go. Here's the split in the movie. And he didn't carry that all the way through. He wanted to have his cake and eat it and, like, have these elements and then go back to the family thing. And it was like, wait... I mean, again, it's not a problem of crossing genres. It can be done very well. Just for me, it didn't work. And I think Tarantino does this, and he loves Tarantino. But I just think,
Tarantino
sadly, Tarantino happens to do it a little bit better in terms of his genre crossovers, or at least they're like more coherent than this.
But did he just try to do too much? Because I think when I was talking to someone about how it just essentially doesn't leave, you're not invested enough, and it's just, you don't leave the cinema with any like lingering thoughts really. And we did wonder, had he ended the film after the stabbing, would it have made it a better film? Did he try to do too much with the sort of epilogue and like sort of tying every loose end and
that's
making
a Korean thing though, right? The melodramatic last 10 minutes of wrapping everything up.
Yeah, but I think it's also like, it was clearly a commentary on, I suppose you see a worldwide like wealth gap, more so on South Korean in particular. And I feel like the whole point of the film was not necessarily to like flesh out individual characters, but more about saying something about society.
What did it say about society though?
Metaphor.
I got that it was trying to, and that it was impressed with the fact that it was a metaphor because your character says it several times. But what was it actually saying about society?
Oh, it's just saying that we all live in a world of inequality.
Great, well done. I mean,
but
what
I
a
think
great observation.
Also,
yeah, maybe.
it's clearly like so they all get their jobs right through networks.
Yeah,
it shows that you can't enter a certain echelon in society without having that network. It doesn't matter how smart you are.
Yeah.
All members of that family were good at something, apart from maybe the dad, who was a bit not as talented. But the daughter and the son, they could have done well. They could have gone to a good university, but they weren't given those opportunities. They live in the basement with their family. So the only way they get in is because the guy's friend gives him an in. It means, and even then, they're still not. Obviously, they're still subservient.
They're still workers,
right?
Still like over yeah.
And there's this thing about how I think I read it in an Adrian Brody review of it.
Richard Brody.
That's
where he's been.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But he said the film points to the fact that the rich kill the poor, the working classes, just by employing half of the working classes, because you're already taking a job away from them. And I got that. It just wasn't deep enough for me. I
don't think it's not because it's deep enough. I think it's just because we don't get that invested with any of the characters.
Yeah,
like you know, at the end, the narrator is the I saw this a long time ago. It's the son, right?
Yeah, it's a voiceover.
It's the voiceover of the son.
He doesn't narrate the whole thing.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Yeah,
it comes
exactly.
in
But
droves
it's
and
kind
droves.
of a question of like, who are we really invested? I was really invested with the sister. At
She
one
should
point,
have been the main character.
Then she got killed off.
I think it's not quite as I don't think it's as simple as being like it's more about the commentary than the characters, because the subject matter of the commentary should be about characters. It should be about people and their personalities and like who they are, and it kind of is like failing. If you fail the people, then the subject matter kind of also fails,
Mm.
which I think was maybe why it didn't work as well as his more kind of like The Host or Memories of Murder, the more kind of bleak or action driven maybe films, because those films don't require as much kind of analysis. Not in a I don't mean that in a critical way, but you don't notice the fact that the characters are kind of a bit more caricaturish because it works in that context.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think it was consistently caricaturish with all the characters, which is, I mean, I think that's a choice, right? That's not like a failure of his not willing to flesh anyone out. That's a real choice.
Yeah, I think it is a choice, but I'm just not. I don't think that works in the context of what it's about, because a film that has a kind of, I wouldn't say it has a socialist message, but it's about like the individual under the pressure of capitalism or the wealth gap or whatever. It just feels a bit like you're sort of you're failing those people a little bit by not giving them kind of nuances and showing them as individuals. If you just treat them as a kind of slightly like kind of like a mass, it seems to sort of like maybe perpetuate the inequality in the maybe I'm getting too deep.
No, but I think for me the issue wasn't that the characters are caricatured or that they were archetypes in some way. It was the structure of the film, the fact that it was like a 2 and a bit hour ensemble piece didn't allow any deeper exploration of individual character arcs or like issues and things like this, and so it was just this mass of, it was more like a fairy tale, right? Like where these characters are just taken on face value, and the plot does more of the social commentary is in the plot, not in the characters, really.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm wrong. Like again, I could have done with having another watch, but I really liked the first 20 minutes, and because I got that he was trying to set us up and get them into the house and all that stuff, but after that, I felt like having this family in the house, I thought they were actually going to try and take over the house and the family, but then with the injection of these people living in the basement, which, you know, can be taken on a metaphorical level as well, but I just felt it just compromised what we were invested in with the first family, you know, with the poor family.
What did you guys think about it visually? I think that was one thing that I think the design was wonderful. I think it was very clearly mapped out, and that was really worked for the film.
And the way like the architecture of the two sets told the story.
Yeah, I thought that was great. But I wasn't entirely convinced by the cinematography. I
didn't really feel a director there, but I that doesn't mean that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know. What do you think?
I thought it was clean. Like,
the simplicity of it, I think, is quite kind of refreshing in a way. Like it doesn't cut a lot, and it's and there's not too much handheld. It felt quite.
Yeah.
It's almost like invisible cinematography. It just feels right.
But I think that allows some quite good moments in a way. So like when there is a bit more of a feeling of a director, then it actually stands out rather than like a constant presence. But saying that, there's not like one moment that really I can like recall of brilliant direction, but that might be my.
Yeah, I mean there was some really good visual moments that they've used for the promotional stills
and the gifs.
And yeah, exactly. But actually, we saw I can't remember the director's name, but a movie called Little Joe last night, and I feel like
Hausner.
Right, and that had the same issue, like in the trailer and in the promotional stills, like all of the frames, you know, all of the compositions work as still images, but I just felt like in both films and in Parasite, the visuals, like those individual compositions didn't work as it's not they didn't work, they just didn't work towards a bigger whole. I feel like
that's kind of, and Uncut Gems, which we're talking about later, it doesn't have that flaw, but it falls into the same category a bit of like the memification of cinema, where like films are being marketed and pushed on the basis in a way of like what memes can be extracted from them. And Parasite, Uncut Gems, and I haven't seen Little Joe, but I've seen the trailer, and there seems to be some moments like that have these kind of small, whatever shots or frames that have the potential and have actually become memes.
Yes.
And that's how they get promoted. And
that's how they make money.
Yeah, and I'm sure, like, even if it's subconsciously, just given that it's a product of its time, that's kind of how it is conceived and designed as well.
And it's not a problem in and of itself, but it's a problem when it compromises the final product.
Yeah, and I think it could get worse, like, as a
it's
film culture.
No? It's distracting. Because, like, a more mainstream example, I guess, is, like, not the latest Star Wars film, but the one before that, and they're on a planet, and then someone licks the floor or something, and then it says, it's salt. It's like, come on, it's so bait what
Did that become a meme?
That is of course it's a meme. Yeah. It's like a really popular meme.
Is
it's
it?
like,
I don't know that many memes, but yeah, sounds like
I spend too much time online, obviously.
Right.
But like Parasite's got at least like 3 or 4 memes out of it already, isn't it?
Probably. Like, I actually do think the way he uses a camera for comedic effect is really effective. Like, even the bit, it's got a really big laugh out of the cinema I was in, but when the sister's about to go into the house for the first time, and then she does that little song about who she's meant to be, and then it, like, the camera swivels to the left and then shows the door when she's pressing the doorbell.
Mm-hmm.
That got a really big laugh, and I just think that's a really simple, effective direction for me.
But the laugh was because of the pan, or it was because of her doing that?
Probably both, because if you think about it, without the pan, I don't think it would have been as fun.
But the meme of that doesn't have the pan, like the thing that everyone keeps sharing. I mean, that's a meme. But
I haven't seen that meme.
Oh,
actually.
really? Okay, I've seen it. Yeah, I mean,
this is going to be a meme podcast soon. I think
it's kind of like
memes.
it is kind of important because that's, you know, it's how films are being on, like, Twitter and social media or whatever. That's how the films are being discussed. And
I think the more memes you see, the more successful it is in pop culture.
Definitely,
for sure.
yeah.
Like the fucking, like the Baby Yoda thing. Come on.
yeah. And not to get, I mean, Uncut Gems hasn't been as successful as Parasite, but it's equally like
the Furby.
This Is How I Win. Anyway, we'll talk about Uncut Gems later, but like that seems to have its moments. I'm gonna. I don't know if I'm gonna come. I haven't seen that, but I do think about it a lot.
But I think. But going back just on the visuals, I think maybe my issues with the film. I've asked myself, are my issues with the film to do a reaction to the hype of the film? And I honestly don't think it is, because I really enjoyed the film watching it. I really did. And like I saw it with my dad, and we both really enjoyed it, and the whole cinema enjoyed it. It was like opening weekend here in London, and it was good, but it wasn't that good. And I think there was, people have kind of compared the cinematography and the storytelling to Hitchcock, and that's kind of what I was expecting. And maybe it's not a very valid criticism to say, well, it wasn't like Hitchcock.
No,
but
good.
Clearly, like, he was inspired by that sort of plot, visual, storyboarded, very precise filmmaking. But
and I think the house is like inspired by North by Northwest, the actual, like, the architecture. So,
and that brings us back to the production design, Shalini, which you mentioned. And I think the fact that the film, something we've spoken about, the fact that the film is like supposed to be about class conflict and the excess of capitalism, the fact that they like are did a huge campaign with a large element of their campaign was for the Oscars and for their advertisements, was the fact that they built the set and they built the tank container, which the whole flood scene happened, and that is, there's a contradiction there inherently of like,
I mean, I have thought about that. It is a huge hypocrisy.
I mean, films are expensive. Let's not pretend they're not.
The question is, that director would probably still get that money. You know, he would definitely still get that money to make a film. And it's like, well, at least he's maybe using his money to sort of make some kind of social commentary. But, you know, the question is, could they have just done that with an actual house? Did they have to build the house? I'm sure a house like that exists that they could work around.
No, I mean, as a filmmaker, I love it. I think it's great. Like, they built this house, they built this set for the like, that's it, you know, that it's exciting. But I mean, it's also like, I don't expect all cinema about class conflict to be filmed in the slum. Like, it's not City of God or something. Not every film has to be that.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. Maybe it's just because it was such a big part of the film, and the campaign of the film was like
I think
Bong
the
Joon-ho criticizing capitalism, but also clearly profiting from it immensely. And the film, like we were saying, the character development and depth not really being much beyond the kind of standard genre thriller, to me, is not a very revolutionary like form of making a film. But
I agree.
it seems more like just more of the same.
But would you say he's criticizing capitalism, or would you say he's
Definitely.
more criticizing a class system that doesn't allow you to move?
But that is capitalism.
Sure,
the
sure.
Capitalism is made by.
But it was less about, because to me this film was about these two families, right? And the rich people, the rich family, were actually, like, for the most part quite nice, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
They just had the
I don't
they
agree
had
with
the
that
crime
at all.
of being rich.
People keep saying that, but they're not like.
Don't get me wrong, they weren't angels or anything, but did they do anything incredibly offensive? Like,
yeah, I think sacking the maid who has tuberculosis and not even like checking if she's all right when she's working for 12.
but it's
That's
not
incredibly
portrayed,
inhuman.
But it's
That's
not
common.
necessarily portrayed in like they're kind of monsters kind of
Yes.
way. You
I
know,
don't know,
they're
I've heard that a lot, and I don't.
relatable.
But I actually
don't
I
really
disagree
buy that.
because the family get into the house by exploiting their prejudices.
exactly.
Like with they don't want the taxi driver the driver to have sex. They don't want this woman to be given their kids TB. Like, they're not a nice family. They're
Sure.
not compassionate or empathetic.
I think they're pretty cardboard, and not actually that they're any more cardboard than the the servant family, but I don't really see, like, I feel like the argument that they're not bad isn't that compelling, but
I don't think they're not bad, because I think they do a lot of things that are very common to do. Like, I think it is common to dismiss people just because of small reasons, even though they've been loyal to you. Like, that is capitalism, actually. Yeah.
Well, they do things that we expect rich people to do. So it's
Exactly.
fine because we know that, it is an archetype.
But
in a
what's
way.
your point?
But my point is, actually, what was my point? We got massively sidetracked.
you got interrupted.
Oh, it was
Yeah,
about
sorry.
capitalism, whether it was about social mobility or
Yeah,
capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was more saying that, like, there will always be this invisible barrier, this, like, line that they talk about in the film, and whether that can be ever crossed is, like, it's impossible. And it's I suppose it's a capitalism thing, but I think it's more just kind of like the way that society is set up. You could work really hard, but that doesn't mean you have a good payoff. And it's more about where you're born into, right? It's not about how people are exploited. It's like what you're born into can determine the rest of your life.
Yeah, like even if you work out of your social situation, that the past is going to be so much closer. That past situation, I mean, something we're actually writing about at the moment is that you can progress so far if you come, even in this country, from like a working class family, for example, but then that reality or poverty is going to be just around the corner for you because you don't have that support system, or even if it's not like a fund that your parents have set up, if it's not that extravagant, like it's still, you're still not going to have the support system that a middle class family has, for example. I think you're right. I agree with the point that the film thought it was about that. And I thought it's important that even if it's just Korea talks about that, or that we talk about that in the West. I guess I didn't think it did it well enough.
I think in a way, like, not to, I can't talk about the thing that we're writing, indulgent, but I think part of the problem is it never really. This is going with that it's a film largely about capitalism. I don't think it ever really holds it to task in the way that all of the characters in the poor family are kind of defined by what skills they have, and that is a very like capitalist reading of people. so the girl is a good artist and forger. The guy is a good bullshitter and talker. And then the mum and dad have their functions as well. The fact there's not a whole lot beyond that for them, kind of to me is more of like viewing them in capitalist terms as people with potential to do well. And because
with a productive function.
With skills.
yeah, exactly. And because they don't succeed is more of a failure within capitalism rather than a failure of capitalism. Whereas in the thing we're writing, like the character actually does succeed and is like a kind of capitalist success to a degree. But the failure is within it because her past doesn't let her forget who she is, basically. And capitalism forces you to assimilate. It doesn't let you remain true to who you are if you're not already privileged or elite or whatever. And I feel like this film doesn't really challenge that notion. It's more like the reason that they don't assimilate is because capitalism doesn't work for them. But it's not saying that it doesn't work in its kind of values and its principles. It's a bit of a rant.
But so yeah, what didn't you like about them? Because I know you. I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate, and I'm coming off as though I hated the film, and I didn't hate the film. Like, but also I just don't. I was talking to someone about it the other day, and they were like, "But you can't deny." They kind of agreed with my criticisms of it, and they're like, "But you can't deny it's a well-made film." What the fuck is a well-made film? Also, if you're talking technically proficient, I mean, why does that mean it's a good movie? Like, and by good movie, I'm obviously is subjective, but it's a forward-looking, interesting film and important for people to watch. Right? Anyway, but because I know you had some doubts about it as well, like what?
Yeah, I think it's just maybe taste. Like, I just didn't really enjoy it as much as maybe his older films. Maybe for the reasons that Theo was saying about the characters. But yeah, I think objectively, I mean, the script, it was pretty tight, you know.
What did you think about the last 10 minutes? So, okay, I'm going to put you on that point because I think... So, I remember everyone saying to me before it goes in, the script's so tight, but, you know, you won't come away thinking anything about it, right? And I was like, okay, I'm going to enjoy this film. It's like a watertight script, blah, blah, blah. I mean, just from a technical point of view, it wasn't. Like, there are so many things. It doesn't even know what genre it is. It's not watertight.
I think it does know what genre it is. I think it's pretty
what genre is
consistent with the rest of his films. It's like a thriller, drama, comedy.
With some horror.
Yeah, with some horror elements.
And melodrama in the last 10 minutes.
But I mean, it's Korean. Like, it's melodramatic. Like, that's a Korean style. I also read online, shout out Reddit, but like, basically, there's a few mentions of a Taiwanese cake or something. I think it was something like that. And apparently and the people in the basement, they went bankrupt, or they're being chased by loan sharks because the guy invested.
Oh yeah,
right?
In that cake shop.
Yeah.
That was a good example of it.
That's a good example
because there's enough time between the two things.
Exactly, but it's also quite topical because apparently that's like a real thing in South Korea, and I would say in China as well. Like, where there's a trend, and then everyone gets on that trend, and then within a week or so it's gone, and then you're left with nothing. So I think maybe a lot of references, I'm not sure how many, but a lot of references are probably South Korean based, harder to pick up in.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
But I think on that note, like every almost like the way the narrative of the family being like inserting themselves in the house is like kind of like a glossary of screenwriting techniques in a way. Like they almost use screenwriting techniques to make a narrative for themselves to be in the house.
But it happened so quick, it wasn't impressive. Like I personally love that stuff, and I think I love when something is paid off in a way that you don't expect, but that you could have seen coming if you look carefully. But I guess it just didn't do it for me.
The quickness of it at that moment is the point, because it is like a flowing sequence. It's not.
It's, like
it's not broken up. Yeah, it's basically
of them going into the house.
I guess
it's like a 5-10 minute sequence,
and it's like very. I think that's obviously also played for comedic purposes, because you got the dramatic music. He picks up the napkin, etc. Like you know,
Yeah,
I
it
think
has
it's
a certain
crowd
pace to it. I think the problem is that maybe it's just a little too predictable.
And there was
at
a waste
every
of
stage.
suspense, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you just knew it was coming every step of the way, and
Yeah, like them getting
That's
into the
really-
house was
it
the
works.
first act, but actually that was the most interesting part. You could have given me 45 minutes of that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought, like, just from reading the description of the film, I thought it was going to be more. The story was going to be about more like this, kind of like the servant, like the family overtaking the rich family and basically like replacing them in the house. So rather than it being that one night where they're kind of house sitting,
Yeah.
that sort of the film is about the process of how that happens. And
that was a great
like-
sequence, by the way. I thought.
Yeah,
Did you enjoy it, George?
Yeah, where they're hiding under the
Yeah,
table and
yeah.
stuff. That was
Yeah.
great. But that
But I
that
thought
was the
that
most
would be the whole
suspenseful
film.
scene, and that
Yes.
he could have used that a lot more. You know.
and that's in the kind of like in The Servant, it's obviously not realistic. What happens isn't supposed to be realistic, but I feel like that, in a way, could be more interesting if it's stretched out.
We mentioned the film The Servant, right?
The Servant,
Is that the movie? Yeah, the black and white
the
movie.
Joseph
Yeah.
Lois, yeah.
And that
Scene.
didn't we watch it at school?
Film school.
I think Brian, shout out Brian.
Maybe I
You've
was
been
asleep.
caught.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Slipping.
Dark Bogard and yeah.
Yeah, but that's interesting because it's like the whole movie is that. But I think the point you made is that it and it could have done this a lot better. But is that even though they manage and they're smarter than the rich family and they're like more apt and they have better skills, except for the dad in a way. Like the film I would have liked to have seen, which means fuck all, but like is them getting into the house for the first 45 minutes and then the cultural and social barriers being their obstacles to remaining in the house, and actually you can get through the glass ceiling like in whatever way possible, whether it's either literally by invading someone else's house or working your way up the ladder. But it's like a game of snakes and ladders where there's always going to be a snake if you're from that strata of society. You know, you're always gonna. But then he decides to switch the genre up a little bit and go got ya, and just try and be clever and
But
be like, well, actually, there's a family in the basement.
It sounds like the original draft of the script or whatever, which I think Nick Chen asked him in his Dazed interview.
Shout out,
Nick
we saw him
Chen.
yesterday actually at the beer fight.
Huge shout out to Nick Chen. He asked Bong about his original ending, and he basically was like, actually, the film was originally going to be like the wealthy family get locked in the basement, and the poor family
That
kind
would have
of
been great.
take
Yeah,
over their
that'd been fun.
roles and just stay inside all day, and no one ever knows that that's
Yeah.
happened.
Even
And
if
that's
it was-
kind of,
I
that's
like
kind
that
of
idea.
better.
But even if it was more predictable, it at least would have had a function of suspense. You know, like even if the ending is a touch predictable, like the in between would have been more of a ride. And it's just a taste thing, I guess. It's like I'm more interested in wondering how something's going to unfold, even if I know it's going to unfold, than being shocked.
Yes.
You know?
I remember you saying once that you liked, I think you liked, like films that don't explain everything, that leave you with questions. I don't think this is a film that leaves you that many
No,
questions.
Right.
Nah.
So maybe that's
not.
why.
Yeah.
It's just tight in that way.
It feels maybe like it's a combination of that first draft idea and the final execution, where it's like sort of the characters from the more absurdist story then matched with something that's a bit more realistic or more kind of conventional, and there's a bit of a sort of maybe like a little bit of a disconnect there. I mean, the film that it wrote does remind me of, that actually does seem quite similar to, is La Cérémonie, the French film from the 90s, Claude Chabrol, which is like also
With
about Isabelle Huppert and Sandrine Bonner. She plays a you call it a servant. She becomes the maid
basically.
to this
Yeah.
very bourgeois French family
Country home.
with like country house, and they listen to opera and like a kind of just they're very wealthy.
They're like the family Parasite, and also is like they're shown in a comedic light as well.
And her secret is that she's illiterate, and she tries to hide that from them, and that's kind of where like the source of the
maid is
the drama
comes.
Sundry Burnet's character, can't remember. She's called Sophie, I think, or Jean. But I don't know if it's a reflection. Maybe because French society has a more like there's more of a sense of like revolution in their culture, or I don't know, less. The class barriers aren't as strict as in here. Again, maybe I'm talking shit.
Korea.
Or maybe in Korea. But it did feel like it does feel a bit more nuanced in its kind of class analysis than Parasite does. I think because it kind of, I mean, there's we're not talking about that,
but no, I think you're right. But it also raises the issue that I don't understand not even in a small way the class divide in Korea. So the film is perhaps very specific to that culture and the style and the absurdity of it, in the same way that magical realism was in literature, what in Latin America was a kind of grew out of the absurdity of the violence of the narco wars and stuff like that. That this is I'm not saying it's as big or deep as that, but it is a result of that, and I just don't personally tap into that,
That's understandable.
You don't tap what?
Like the genre of the film, the way the film's made, Parasite, the way that it's not very subtle for my money. Like it's not, it's that because I don't understand the cultural, and that's my bad, that's on my shoulders. But because I don't know, I haven't bothered yet to understand the cultural subtleties of it, that I don't relate to it in a way. But I still think that I don't know why that makes it even more confusing as to why American audiences have taken to it so much.
Because I think it's something that Americans relate to. I mean, they're obviously the creators of that, and it's obviously easier. It's probably a lot more easy to digest that kind of commentary coming from a foreign country than it is to digest it when it's your own. Like, if that film were made in the US, it would be a completely different film. I just think audiences find it easier to just digest when it's a different culture.
But I don't know if that's because it's a different country. I think maybe it's more just like the style of it. It does kind of spoon feed its meaning to you a bit. Whereas in contrast with La Cérémonie, there's more attempts or ways of making you identify with the bourgeois family, and less sort of sugarcoating of the maid character. Like, she's kind of a bit lazy and she's not a very good maid, and it doesn't try and justify her presence by showing how clever and resourceful she is. And that to me feels like that actually makes you think about how you treat people and what your perspective is on class in like real terms, which Parasite more is like tells you kind of what.
But I think also, like, realistically, he is a mainstream director. Like, this is a mainstream film. It's like
Memories of Murder to me is like a challenging
film. But I don't think he was as big back then. Like, he's a household name now in Korea for sure, right? Like, he's Park Chan-wook, like,
I'm sure
that
that
new
would have
age.
been a very big film, no?
I think he was established for sure, but I don't think he's like this level now, where after Snowpiercer, after Okja, he was introduced to a more Western audience. I think before then, Memories of Murder, I don't think a lot of Western or like, people not Korean would have watched that. Especially because Memories of Murder is like a very Korean story, I think. So you have to keep in mind that he's probably writing also for a more mainstream audience. I think he's seen as something maybe a bit more indie here, but just because he's foreign.
And that's another problem, but but a film actually where I think the class issues were better addressed from on a cinematic level.
Hi, Daniel Blake.
Was the Japanese film Shoplifters from 2 years ago.
I did not.
And I'm not gonna try and pronounce the director's name. But, but I mean, it has a problem with the last 10-15 minutes again. It just goes a bit too far in terms of just takes us too much out of the world, as like has its traditional denouement of like, and here's the family now, you know.
I just remembered another Korean film that actually looks at class. Burning. Did you guys watch that? Holy shit! I forgot the name of the director, unfortunately.
Lee Chang-dong.
Yes.
But, based on the.
Yeah, based on Murakami.
Yes.
Yeah,
based on
sorry,
Murakami.
yeah.
But Burning is a bit more of a fucked up.
Yeah,
But
that
it's more
was
psychological and more in
Yes.
one genre thing, right?
for sure.
Yeah, it's a kind of.
And it's just a
thriller,
lot more like
psychological.
loose, I think, in terms of its storytelling. It probably allows you to just think a bit more about it and reflect on it. Because when I came out of that, when it ended, I was like, the fuck did I just watch? And then I immediately said to someone in the bathroom of Picture House, like, oh, didn't really get it, didn't
It's
really
just
like
a random.
it. Yeah, to just, because this is how
In the
bathrooms
next
work.
stall.
Who started the conversation?
Yeah. I think I was in the line. I was like, what do you think?
Oh, really?
But then a few weeks afterwards, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like, the score, the cinematography,
Yeah.
like the storytelling, the characters.
The cat.
So
Oh,
what film would
exactly.
you recommend to like the average cinema goer out of the two, Parasite or not? Like I think
Average
you're gonna
cinema
like, but in
goer.
terms of the film that you have to see on like you have to hear this album, like you have to see this movie.
I don't think a lot of mainstream audiences would like Burning.
Yeah, but like
So-
not like, oh, you're really gonna love this movie, but like
Sure, you should go watch it.
yeah,
I think, people should go watch Burning for sure.
over Parasite, just for the record.
I wouldn't say over Parasite.
Well, I don't-
No,
I
I'm
think
sorry.
those are
I mean, I just
very
meant out of the two
different
for your
kind of
money. Like,
films.
what did you prefer? Basically, is what I'm saying.
I think I actually preferred Burning, but I do think I'd probably rewatch Parasite faster than I'd rewatch Burning because that's I thought that was a heavier film.
As a representation of Korean cinema, I feel like Burning is a better.
For Korean art house.
Yeah, no, but I don't know. Like, I mean, I haven't seen everything, but
Yeah.
I feel like one of the main principles is violence in
Yes.
Korean film. I like aestheticization of violence,
Yes.
but the best ones kind of challenge. They sort of challenge your enjoyment of it while it's happening because it's so kind of choreographed, but also you're aware it's like terrible. It creates like quite an interesting conflict, I think. But I don't think Parasite does because it's too like swift and it kind of glosses over stuff with humor and with like banter.
But another film that reminds me of what you're talking about is whose my opinion differs to a lot of people I've spoken to about it is Old Boy, and I saw it in a cinema for the first time like 6 months ago I'd ever seen it, and I just, even though it's a great
Shout
film,
out
like
Prince Charles.
Yeah, shout out Prince Charles, but
Shout out The Room.
not the Prince Charles, like Prince Charles Cinema, but the film. I kind of had this feeling that like I love the acting and actually the script, the plans and the payoffs and the script mechanics were so much more effective in my opinion than Parasite. But it just had, I had that feeling at the end when I was like, okay, that was like it was definitely a great 2.5 hours or 2 hours of of my Saturday afternoon.
That's a ride. But yeah, it that's another film which like ties it up really well, no?
Yeah,
like, maybe too
in my opinion, better than Parasite.
Yeah.
But
that's a great film.
My favourite, just if anyone wants to know, one of my favourite films is Yellow Sea.
Oh my god, that was so good. That's so good. I think the same director did The Wailing.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Yes, The Wailing as well.
But what's
watch that
I'm gonna write these
fucking
down.
film.
What-
Watch that fucking film.
The Wailing is probably a bit more like ambitious in a way than, or it's a bit,
100%.
it's like it's got different levels. But Yellow Sea is just like such a gritty
So
crime
good.
film.
He is so good at doing crime scenes.
Yeah.
Like it always looks brutal. It always looks like at least 10 people got murdered
It's
in
so
that room.
raw, like
Yeah,
but
it's so
not
good.
kind of lame documentary style. It's
Yeah,
still,
exactly.
Like, it's been
The
it's
cinematography
been
is great.
designed. Yeah, the cinematography is amazing. It's also got some of my favorite like Korean pot noodle brand that he like depressingly eats when he's still in the convenience store.
Breaking news now! The star of Korea is now in the country! Oh my god, the fans are going crazy! They're all screaming!
Korea's #1 noodle. Your noodle.
With Shin Ramyun, I can savor Korea! Just can't get enough! Whew.
Shin Ramen.